The addition of George Pickens redefines the receiving game, and with Dallas expected to emphasize the run, the Cowboys tight ends have quietly slipped off the radar for now. But make no mistake, this group will have opportunities to have its moment. After a 2024 marred by injuries, Jake Ferguson's primed for redemption. Healthy and entering a contract year, he's laser focused on proving he's the matchup nightmare Dallas needs.
I know what it takes. I know what it, I was Pro Bowl 1 year, and last year not the year that I wanted to have. And, just going back and reassessing myself after this season, just knowing what it's going to take. And, cutting out some of the bad things in my life, whether it be food, whatever it may be. And, really locking in and getting with Dak, making sure I'm clean on all the offense. And, with the new coaching staff, just making sure that turnover is seamless.
Meanwhile, former second rounder Luke Schoonmaker flashed some potential when Ferguson went down. And don't sleep on Brevyn Spann-Ford, last year's prize undrafted free agent who isn't just hanging around, he's stalking the depth chart, hungry to make his mark. Yet the group as a whole knows it cannot coast. Improvement will be demanded. They'll need to sharpen every route, tighten every block, and elevate their play to help complete this offense. So what's the latest? What's happening on the field? Iisha Morrison's got the insider scoop straight from OTAs, and we're breaking it all down. There's my position group I think that is very intriguing and probably more solid to me than maybe most believe, and that's the tight end group. I think healthy, Ferg being back, I'm a big believer in Brevyn Spann-Ford. I liked him when he came out. Schoonmaker's a guy who's a second-round pick that's been pushed since he's been here, so he ain't got no choice, right? But to improve, or he gonna get that spot taken, right? And then you got some of these other guys, the Fairweathers. We'll see what happens with what's the kid that got hurt last year in camp?
Stevens.
John Stevens. We'll see what happens with him.
Yeah.
But I think the top three tight ends on this team serve a purpose. They're bigger bodies in regards to Spann-Ford and Schoonmaker, and we know Clayton Adams likes to run a lot of 13. I think Ferg, a lot of people are down on Ferg because of last year. I'm not. I think there's context to his game. I think he bounces back. But right now, and I know it's no pads or anything like that, what are you seeing out of that room from your first go about it?
Well, definitely yesterday, Ferg had a couple of passes. They're setting him up to get him in the open field. So it's just like a pass into the flat. Obviously, some misdirection before that to where he is literally wide open. There was a couple times he was wide open, wasn't nobody within like 5 yards of him to give him some of those yak opportunities. Brevyn Spann-Ford is becoming one of Dak's favorite targets. He's becoming somebody that he looks for. And again, we saw that in the first practice, like, dang, Brevyn getting a lot of fun. And then yesterday you see him make some pretty good. I mean, like, seriously, I'm talking about hand catching, like, for Dak Prescott in the middle of the field, not super down the field, just in the intermediate game, but efficient. And you see him turn up field. I always thought he had a little bit of wiggle. He's not the most, fluid and all that stuff. No. He definitely has yak ability. He does. Maybe that is something he's advancing in his game. I talked to him in the locker room last year. It was important for him to not only because he was a dominant blocker in college, and he did tell me that he had his come to Jesus moments while he was like adjusting to the NFL. He's a big dude. This is like Brevyn's like what,
270, I think.
So he had to put on a little bit more muscle, which it looks like he has. He shed some of that baby fat, and he looks himself. But Ferg looks himself too. He got that pep in his step, that bounce to him. You see him looking for yardage after the catch again, because we did see last year that he was a little reluctant, especially after his injury.
Concussion,
yeah, absolutely. I will say Schoonmaker had, I think, a drop or two. I want to say he had one drop, and it was key too. And Dak put it on the money, and it was just like, dog, you don't need that.
Like, you mentioned he looked frustrated with that.
Yes. There you could see visibly that Dak was like, come on. But that's also because these periods are competitive. I'm telling you, like, the defense is defensive and offensive energy. They are trying to succeed when they're running these plays. They're not, obviously, again, they're not in pass. We know. We know. But at the same time, you see that fire that they're really trying to go at each other's necks. And so he's like, damn, that's a point for the defense. I'm like, I gotta
Yeah.
hear this all week. I gotta hear this all week. So, and then as far as the other gentleman in the room, um, Rivaldo Fairweather is somebody I'm keeping my eye out on because I specifically have talked to Lula Wells, and that is someone that he is excited about. And he has some thoughts and stuff very similar to kind of how he was with John Stevens. And again, I empathize for John Stevens. To tear your ACL twice is insane.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what to expect from him, but I do know that Fairweather is a bowling ball in the open field and can make you pay as well. He's not super shifty, but he will run through your face. Now, I do think I'm gonna ask you, Sky, if your tight end room ends up being, hypothetically speaking, Jake Ferguson, Brevyn Spann-Ford, and Hunter Lipke. I mean, Schoon's gonna make it, but if Hunter Lipke's your fourth like tight end person, because like I said, they're lining him out
As like an H back, basically.
Yeah, I guess, but Shoddy said they view him in a tight end, fullback, and running back capacity.
Yeah. That's basically what H-back does. The Jameez Olawale, Chris Cooley's of the world. They move those guys around in that way. I personally am fine with that because thinking about how Clayton Adams wants to use these guys. You have a pass-catching weapon in the mold of Jake Ferguson, and then you got two bigger bodies that, are supposed to be blocking type guys, but they have some pass-catching ability to them. Schoon, he did improve last year. You saw some improvement in that aspect. Brevyn Spann-Ford, as you saw him as the year went by, get more comfortable and things like that. So and then obviously Lipke is a wild card guy, right? So I'm fine with that. I'm not saying, hey, man, this is going to be the gangbuster of a room. This is the best room in the world, nothing like that. You said something. Ferg looked like himself. If Ferg is himself and George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are out there, that changes everything. I think for Ferg and Dak's connection for 2025, because the problem that we had last year, and even though they weren't the same from a dynamic standpoint, they still were successful. But you saw Ferg utilized totally different because of McCarthy didn't want to throw the seam shot or didn't want to call the seam shots. It didn't want to take the long drop backs. It wanted to get the ball out quick. There wasn't a whole lot of creativity in utilizing him. I think the most creativity we saw was in the Pittsburgh game. So if he's back to himself, remember, guys, he was an 800-yard, 8-touchdown guy in 2023. When you bring in the playoff statistics. So this isn't just some run-of-the-mill dude. He can be highly productive. It'll come down to Spann-Ford and Schoonmaker complementing him and making that room at the top, solid when it's time to run, because they're going to run a lot of 13. And now we'll see how they do with 12. If we can get a second guy to be a dynamic too, that can change some things too.
Yeah, I was going to mention to you, he just seems, and as someone that's been around Ferg, obviously the other girls on Girls Talk, Boys Talk, and those, like, we've been around Ferg. His spirit seems like it was before. He seems happy. He seems joyous. You see him joking. You see him dancing. And I will say, I feel like we missed some of that last year. But also too, in regard to the 13 personnel and things like that, I know that you took a deep dive into Clayton Adams' system. Was that out of necessity? Or was he not running other things? Like, who was I can't remember who the second back or the second tight end was for.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with their second
and
third tight end group.
Ertz was there, right?
Ertz was with Washington last year.
Yeah, so he was there the year before. So I do want to look at, was 13 personnel based off of necessity? Like, he couldn't do other groupings as much?
If I had to guess, and this is a great question to ask Clayton, by the way, but if I had to guess, I would say it was what they did well. And if you listen to what Clayton says and what Shoddy says is, hey, we're going to do what we do well. And, and I'm just more so speaking from a run game standpoint. When you watch a lot of their productive runs, they utilize 13 personnel in Arizona at the second highest rate in the league. Okay, so they're utilizing it a lot, and they were good at it. They would use a lot of pre-snap motion, at-snap action, The tight ends were either wham blocking or the lead blocking. They're lined up in the backfield. They'll start off wide, shift inside. They did a lot of clever things, and you got some productive runs out of it. So that's why I bring that up a lot. And when you say out of necessity, I just think they did it well. They did have Trey McBride, who they didn't have to run a bunch of 13. They could have just went 11 personnel and said Trey going to crush it, and he did. But they said, nah, everybody going to be involved. So that is something that Ferg is going to have to reprogram himself with. And this is why I say reprogram. Year one, a lot of people are down on Ferg's blocking. His rookie year, Jake Ferguson was a blocking dude. Yeah. Like I understand he has some great catches and great highlights as a pass catcher, no doubt about it. But that linebacker mentality, he used to be a linebacker, was ingrained in him in year one. I think in year two, he was more so, okay, I gotta be a pass catchy weapon guy. And it wasn't the same, or year three, whatever it was. And now I think he's gonna have to dial that back in because this team is gonna run the ball and they're gonna require the tight ends to run block.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's something we're gonna see and again, I think I see this with a lot of the best offenses is that they have guys like that are pass catchers, that are stars, that are willing to block on the outside, get downfield, get to the second level, ain't scared to do it. There's a lot of selflessness in establishing your run game. And especially to have a run game that has explosive plays downfield, somebody got to be blocking down there. Somebody got to hold down that safety. So, yeah, the wide receivers and tight ends are going to be asked to be physical at the point of attack. I will say, too, something that I haven't heard much people talk about is the fact that, in reference to talking about Jake Ferguson coming along, twin, if Jake Ferguson come along, well, first of all, no, Pickens makes life easier for him, too. It's not just CD Lamb. That's going to make things open up for him as well. So we talked about CD being grateful for Pickens. Man, listen, teams literally were looking at Ferguson as our wide receiver too last year. Let's keep it and even though he was banged up, he still was the biggest threat offensively outside of Kevontae Turpin next to CD Lamb.
Yeah. I think it was Allen Robinson who said this about George Pickens.
Because when I played with George Pickens in Pittsburgh, probably the most cover two that I've saw. And that was predicated around George.
I'm like, well, shoot, if they're doing that in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh don't have a CD Lamb. You better believe they're going to put two dudes on that roof majority of the time. And when that happens, guess what's open? That middle of the field. Yes. And I just really would think that they're going to try to attack that with whether it be CD Lamb motioning inside, whether it be Jake Ferguson, whether it be the line or the running backs. But yeah, George Pickens opens this thing up for everybody, not just CD Lamb. You're absolutely correct.